Let's talk about the laser printing process. The laser printing process is broken down into several steps. Let's talk about each of those now. The first is the processing step. In the processing step, this actually begins at the computer that initiates the print job. The computer will calculate the data that needs to be printed and then send that off to the printer, either as an entire print job or it will spool it one page at a time. Once it gets to the printer, that data is recalculated and stored in RAM until it's ready to print. So that's the processing stage. It's kind of a pre-stage to the actual printing that happens in the laser printer. So there we have the processing stage. The next step is the charging step. In the charging step, a negative voltage is applied to the primary corona wire. That's a wire that sits on the drum in the printer. So we'll label this the primary corona wire. And that negative voltage that is applied to that wire comes from the high voltage power supply within the printer. That wire actually presses against the drum, which is often inside of the toner cartridge. In fact, a lot of these pieces are inside the toner cartridge on many laser printers. So in the charging step, a negative voltage is applied to the primary corona wire, which then passes through to the drum. So the drum now has a negative charge, and that is the charging step. Next on the list is the exposing step. This is also known as the writing stage. In the writing step or exposing step, the laser is activated and it shines its light on the drum as the drum spins. What this does is it applies a lesser negative charge to the drum, and that ultimately is going to be what creates the letters, those imaged areas, those areas written by the laser. And by lesser negative charge, I'm saying, let's say this particular laser printer applied a negative charge of negative 600 volts DC to the primary corona wire. Well, when the laser shines on the drum, that area would be a lesser charge, meaning perhaps negative 100 volts DC. So it's actually a greater number, but it's a lesser negative charge than this. So that is the exposing, also known as the writing stage. Next is the developing stage. In the developing stage, the toner is applied to the drum. And basically what happens is you have negatively charged toner, but it's a higher charge than the areas of the drum that were written to by the laser. And so the toner is applied to the areas of the drum that were written to. And that is the developing step. The next step is the transferring step. In the transferring step, the toner is going to be transferred over to the paper. What happens is the paper now enters the printer itself, and it does this through some entrance rollers that help guide it in. So this is our paper here, my dotted line. And on most laser printers, the paper passes through between the drum and what's known as the transfer corona wire. The transfer corona wire is applied a positive charge. And that's important because the paper presses right up against it, as opposed to pressing up against the drum. So your paper is going right against the transfer corona wire. So this gets a positive charge, and the paper gets a positive charge. Now remember, the toner that's on the drum has a negative charge. And when it comes to voltages, opposites attract. So the toner is applied to the paper, and then it passes on into the next step. So that is the transferring step. Next, the paper is going to go past a static eliminator strip. You want to remove the static from the paper because so much voltage has been applied to it. And if you don't remove that, the toner could just go flying anywhere. So this static eliminator strip is going to remove that excess voltage from the paper. Now the next step is the fusing step. In the fusing step, the toner is compressed onto the paper with heat, making it somewhat permanent. So the paper is going to pass through a fusing assembly. And these are rollers that are going to press the toner on there and heat up that paper to about 400 degrees Fahrenheit. So in the fusing assembly, that toner becomes permanent on paper, going through the fusing rollers, and a lot of heat is applied to make it permanent. So that's the fusing step. The last step is the cleaning step. This is just cleaning up the printer. In the cleaning step, you have some excess toner on the drum. And the drum keeps spinning, and that's scraped off by a rubber blade. And that just falls into a little toner receptacle. Also, there's an erasing lamp. And that shines a light on the drum so that it can bring the drum down to 0 volts. So everything is basically now reset, and the printer is ready for the next print job. And that is the cleaning step. So we have the processing step, the charging step, the exposing step, which is also known as writing, the developing step, the transferring step, which is really important. That's when the toner is transferred to the paper, because the toner has a negative charge. The paper has a positive charge, which came from the transfer corona wire. Remember, opposites attract when it comes to voltages. The fusing step, where we had that 400 degrees and the pressure of the pressure rollers. And then finally, the cleaning step, where the printer is cleaned up and everything is set anew for the next print job. So that's it for the laser printing process.